And now.
Welcome to Organiary 2021, the official launch. I'd just like to say that all of us have been on our own personal journey to learn about the misinformation given to us by the dietary guidelines demonizing saturated animal fats and proteins in our diet. So before I go too much further, I'll pass you over to Niall. What is it with organ meats, Niall?
That's a question, Belinda. Organ meats are the real superfood, the naturally occurring, growing everywhere, part of every beast that is ever slaughtered for meat, superfood. And I won't say that I've been obsessed with organ meats my whole life, but I have eaten them my whole life. And even as a child, I remember the difference between those who ate organ meats and those who didn't, the nutrient deficiencies. It's just simply the cheapest way to get superfoods and nutrients into your body. And I just can't get organ meats out of my head. They're always coming back into my consciousness. And at the moment where, the world seems to be flooded with, too many calories and not enough nutrition, it just seems like a really good place to start. Let's start looking at organ meats. But really, that's what's with organ meats.
So what are we really talking about here, Laban? Is it liver, heart? What sort of organ meats do you consider in your diet?
Well, this is a really phenomenal question, Belinda, and I really thank you for taking the time to be involved in this and ask this very important question. But for me, growing up, it was the only thing I knew as organ meats was the chicken liver pate that my darling mother used to feed me, and because I was fed it at such a young age, I acquired a really great taste for it. But organ meats are basically the non-muscle meat, really, of any animal. And I even think that term is probably not even 100% correct if you talk about eating a lamb heart, when you cross the finish line of an ultramarathon race, for example. Sweetbreads, the thymus gland, liver, kidneys, gizzards, lots of things that people would be eating day to day, but don't actually realize that maybe they are organ meats.
So the vilification of animal proteins and fats in our diet might be false. The whole point of this is why Organiary? What inspired you to start this campaign, Niall?
Well, there's a couple of reasons I started the campaign. One was that I was having a nutritional argument with somebody recently who suggested that the animal industry or meat eaters were wasting lots of food, and they called me out for animal wastage. And I thought, do you know what? You've got a point, because it's only a minority of people who eat organ meats, and we do waste half the animal. So I thought, hey, it could be interesting to see if there is an appetite for bringing organ meats back into the diet. Then I had a bit of a search about this, and I did discover that there's a subculture in eating organ meats, and that over the last number of years, a UK cohort has actually started a campaign called Organiary to encourage people to include organ meats in their diet for reasons of sustainability of meat production and for the highly nutritious benefits of organ meats. And I thought, if it's good enough for those folks in the UK, well, then let's start it down here in Australia. And that's really where it came from.
I love that. Great answer. I'm very aware of the public health collaboration in the UK and their Organiary project, so it's great that we've got an Aussie one as well. Why have you become involved, Tracey, Laban? What got you started?
Should I go first?
Tracey, you go first.
So I got involved because I got a phone call from my good mate Niall and my good mate Laban to get involved. And, look, I have to be really honest and say organ meats for me is very new. So I definitely grew up not eating it. My dad loved it. My mum, not so much of a fan. And, I sort of grew up thinking it was icky. Had a whole lot of thinking about it just being stuff we didn't eat. And I guess I hadn't even really thought too much about it until I learnt that that's just so nutrient dense, and particularly, to include it in our health and in what we eat is just such a great thing to do, not just for our health, but for the planet as well. I mean, the thought of throwing away so much of what was once considered the most important part of the animal to eat, I just think there's so much we can see around that. Particularly remember when I was, so my husband's Greek, and they have Greek Easter. It's really, really big. And traditionally giving that part of the animal to the female priestess, if you like, was done. And I remember being pregnant with one of my children, and Papu, my father-in-law, came over and honoured me by giving me that. And, that was the moment I had a whole lot of, wow, yes, I'm going to eat this, and it's never as bad as I thought. So my thinking's changed a lot, and I'm really grateful that the boys have asked me to be involved, and I think it's a fantastic thing that we can all see more about, and really just try and include more of it in our diet and our kids' diets as well.
Great answer. And so, Laban, your answer?
Well, I think mine was born out of laziness, really, and the reason I say that is that when I learned how nutrient dense organ meats were, particularly things like liver and kidneys, that type of thing, I realized that I could cut down the amount of food that I could eat and get the nutrition that my body required. And so by increasing the amount of organ meats in my diet, I don't need to spend as much time trying to get other less nutrient dense food into me. So when Niall came to me with this idea, I was behind it 150%, especially given the fact that my darling butcher from Gary's Quality Meats and Pram Market in Melbourne here tends to give me free offal. And I know a lot of butchers throw away a lot of it. So like Tracey touched on, the waste components become really important to me. I certainly, through my own health challenges and adopting a largely animal protein only diet, I feel like I've become a lot more connected to the animal. I think it's really important that we honour the animal by eating nose to tail as best we can. And I think if people understood the nutritional density of the actual organ meat itself, it would make it a lot more palatable to eat. And that's certainly what happened for me.
It's a really, really important point that both of you brought up about the waste. And when you consider what our ancestors did eat, they ate the organ meats. You look back at the Aboriginal First Nation people here in Australia, and they ate organ meats. I mean, this is so important to our health, and vitamin B12 and all the essential fatty acids and essential vitamins that are bioavailable in animal proteins and fats, and specifically in some of the organ meats that we're able to access. It's the cheap meats. People sometimes say, that low carb, keto, carnivore diets are impossible because they're so expensive, but they're actually not. If you look at those meats, they're often the cheap meats, and as Laban, you've just mentioned, your butcher's giving them to you for free. So, but in this modern world, if you think about in this modern world where we can access food anytime, 24/7, all sorts of food, from the freezers in the supermarket and the processed food shelving, cereals, you can have whatever you want anytime. Why do we really need to think about the importance of fresh, seasonal, local? Why do we need to think about supporting our farmers producing organ meats? Niall, have you got an answer?
Yeah, well, so I think there's two things to consider why we would need this in the modern world. And the first is the obesogenic food environment. Almost everything that we could touch in a supermarket is designed to either rob nutrients from us or certainly just to feed us sugar so that no nutrients are taken in. Organ meats are a salve for this because they are hugely nutrient dense. I mean, way more than spinach, than broccoli, than any superfood you need, more than any Brazilian root that comes in lovely marketing packaging. Organ meats are actually the real superfood. So that's number one. We should be getting that in. And the fact that we're not getting that into ourselves and into our children is making us less strong and less healthful. And the second one is that there's a huge argument out there from people who would like animals not to be eaten for just that reason, for the protection of animals. And they have turned the argument towards climate and sustainability. And if simply we doubled the amount of animal produce that was eaten from every animal, which it means basically instead of throwing 50% of the animal away, we actually eat all of those organ meats as well, and eat the bone marrow and have liver pate and eat the beef heart, which is fantastic, by the way, then we instantly half the impact of growing that animal. It changes the maths on everything. So I think two very, very important reasons in the modern world why it's even more key that we eat organ meats: nutrition, sustainability.
That's a great point. If I was to say I've not really eaten a lot of organ meats over my lifetime. I don't believe Gary really ate much at all. He was a spam boy. What sort of foods would you swap out, Tracey, to be able to put organ meats into your meals? What would you suggest there?
Yeah, I guess it's not really more about swapping it out. I think it's more about adding it in. You know, I think it has a place in any diet. And if you even just added it into what you're currently eating, you're going to be adding a heap of nutrition into your diet. And, you know, I'm a big fan of being honest, certainly with my kids. I know there's a lot of people hide it. You know, we can grate a bit of liver in the mince and stuff like that for the kids and not tell them. And I mean, I've certainly done that before, you know, particularly when I was still getting my head around it. But I think it's really important, certainly for me with my children, to talk about this and to make them aware of what they're eating and why they're eating it and why it's being prepared for them and what's sort of gone on for that. You know, you touched on it, Laban, you know, honouring the animal and understanding where it's all coming from. It's a great conversation to have with your kids around the dinner table, obviously varying degrees depending on their ages, but you know, you can start young. And I think the fact that there's such a big disconnect now with where our food comes from is something that can be rectified at home, and just with the conversation around, well, why are we eating it? You know, it's about energy and nutrition and then bigger things beyond you as well. And so that's where I would start. You know, there's no rules. I think any organ meat is great. And, you know, I've just been shocked, as you said, at the cost of it. You know, you could buy a massive thing of chicken hearts for like $2. It's so cheap. And but play around with it and just try different things. And I mean, chicken liver pate is the perfect one, I think, because it's not very strong. My 5-year-old, he's now 6, he loves it. He will eat it with his steak. My 8-year-old, not so much yet. They're all different, but I think, you know, just keep trying it but use it as a great conversation starter to help educate your kids about where it all comes from.
The disconnect is a really, really important thing, I think. I've been looking at the dietary guidelines for a long time and looking to see what's shaping the vested interests that are shaping our dietary guidelines. There's no mention of organ meats on our dietary guidelines at all. In fact, if you look at our dietary guidelines, they're telling you to eat processed food, especially processed carbohydrates. So the education, we've got to disconnect from our dietary guidelines, let alone in the supermarkets and wherever else. So this is a really, really important thing. Where would you start with all of this, Laban? I mean, you walk into a supermarket, you don't see a lot of organ meats. Are you recommending we go back to local butchers?
I couldn't recommend that more highly enough, Belinda. And for the simple fact, when you can establish a relationship with someone who has a direct link to where the animal is sourced, you are in a lot more control about the quality. And for people that are worried about feedlot animals and sows that are kept in these horrible conditions or whatever, you can vote with your feet and ensure that the produce that you are getting comes from pastured, organic, if that's what you decide. Educate yourself and understand where the food comes from, because the people that sell us our food are driven largely by the instruction that we give them by being consumers. And, you know, I've got this extraordinary relationship with my butcher. I've been going there for 3 and a bit years now. I'm his number one private customer, he tells me. and I have an ability to tap into resources that you can never get it in a supermarket environment. For people that live a long way from a butcher, There's a lot of alternatives online now. We live in a technological age where you can access the most extraordinary fresh produce from within, locally sourced areas with the click of a mouse. So there really is no excuse. It's about the want and the desire. And I think once you understand how effective the food can be to help improve your own life, it becomes a real no-brainer.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, please.
Belinda, just on that particular topic that Laban said, and I think I can only speak as a middle-aged man, okay? A middle-aged man goes to an electronics store if he wants to buy a new PC or a new, Blu-ray player. He goes to a sports store if he wants to buy new trainers. He doesn't buy them in Kmart. He doesn't buy them in the general store. He goes to the specific store because he knows what he wants. He wants quality, and he wants to make sure that he is given the right item. And I think that food that we put into our bodies every single day should be treated the same. And like Laban said, if you go to a butcher who cares about the supply chain of that meat, he cares about the meat. It's the only thing he sells. That butcher is going to steer you in the right direction, is going to be able to give you a better product than a large generalist store that is just bulk selling stuff. And quite frankly, when you switch to a butcher, you actually discover they are no more expensive than the supermarkets, but you're getting better produce. I would really recommend that. And it's something that makes sense, certainly to me.
We have some fantastic butchers here in Launceston. In fact, we have a paddock to plate. Tasmanian lamb producers actually have their farm. They do all the killing themselves and then take it to sell from a shop that they own. So it's true paddock to plate. It's amazing.
That is good.
I guess what I wanted to know is there a difference between the different organ meats? Like, is a beef heart healthier than a chicken liver? What sort of advice would you give to people on what's the best organ meat to eat, or doesn't it really matter?
Well, if I can take that initially anyway, you could start playing semantics and thinking, well, it depends on what that particular animal has been fed and, where the throughput is. But typically, beef is the best meat for us as humans, and their organs are the best organ meats for us. However, the organ meats coming from lambs, coming from pigs, coming from chickens are still so far above most foods in their nutrient density that it's almost a shame to say beef liver is the number one. This food group is just out and above every other food in its nutritional punch. And that's what people have forgotten. And our grandparents would know, or maybe our parents' grandparents, they would have known that this was the food to eat to be healthy. And it has just simply been forgotten and the taste gone. But beef liver is certainly number one. Beef heart is an amazing food, and it tastes almost like steak. Beef heart is this big. You can get a massive 2 kilos of beef heart for maybe 10 or 15 bucks. It is the cheapest beef available, and it is incredible. And it tastes a bit like steak. So even if you find the taste of liver slightly sharp or, a little bit unpalatable because you haven't been reared on liver, heart does not have that taste. Brains do not have that taste. There's a lot of places you can go to get the nutrients of organ meats into you and start developing a taste for them.
So not only cheap, but nutrient dense. You're really starting to win me over.
Incredibly nutrient dense.
What exactly does Organuary 2021 involve? What's the campaign about? Niall?
We just want people to eat more organ meats, to take this opportunity to just try it, to trial it, to not assume that it's something that they wouldn't like or that they shouldn't include in their diet, and to just try a few things. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide recipes, we're going to provide links, we're going to provide videos, just little short things to encourage people to try and to make it easy for people to try. Like, I'll throw one out there, is that, like, Colin Fasenage gave us a recipe for chicken liver, for spicy chicken liver. Now, he's from My Kitchen Rules. He's got a huge you know, audience, probably audience recognition. But you know, it was nothing to him. He just threw us a recipe because he believes in eating beef liver. So do we. I have already cooked that and messed up my video, so I couldn't put it out. But it is little things like that we just want to do. We just want to encourage people. And what we intend to do is challenge people as well. We're going to have a little bit of a challenge, which is I'm going to cook up perhaps some sheep brains in the next week or two, which I'm going to enjoy, and then perhaps I will challenge Mr. Laban Ditchburn to cook something else, and hopefully we shall organize a little social media chain challenge.
I see. Well, I know I've already been asked to provide a video of consuming some organ meats. So how many people have you got who have contributed so far?
Well, we do have quite a few contributors so far. We haven't, all of our materials are not in, but it's say Colin Fastenage is there. Sarah Wilson, who wrote the No Sugar books, is in. There have been a couple of other, so a number of chefs are in, and nutritionists. Georgia Linerman, I don't know if you know her, she's a nutritionist who runs a program for getting organ meats into children's meals. It's called Stirring Change. So she has sent us a number of recipes as well. And really, it's what we're just trying to do is collect all the people who believe that children and adults should be having the most nutrient-dense food available and just getting them into one pile, and just, you know, encouraging other people to live healthier, better lives, and of course, be a little bit more sustainable.
Perfect. How will the listeners get involved? You know, what can we do as lay people, as people who might not be that interested or have understood the health benefits of organ meats previously? How can we get involved?
Tracy?
I was going to say Lay.
Sorry. Anybody can answer this one. How do we get involved?
The world of social media makes it easy. So I think, you know, just share and tag Organiary 2021 and tag either any of us in what you do, and then of course encourage your followers to do the same thing. And you know, I think the thing with this, it may be comfortable for you, it may be not, and I think if it's not comfortable, that's okay. I think, just as I said, be curious and play around with it, and just explore and understand when we can sort of poke holes in the things that we think around stuff, well, anything really. You know, something new will come up, and I think we just want to have fun. We just want to just share some opportunities, some different ideas, and just get people thinking outside the box a little bit around this. So any involvement is great. I know there's people who are still going to get us videos. You know, if we can get the videos in, that would be awesome. If we, you know, you can just share what we're doing, and yeah, get involved in any way you like. I think just have fun with us. That's all we want to do. Laves?
And that's a really great point, Tracy. And I think the genesis of this initiative, this is the beginning of something really, really wonderful. And I think it's tantamount to getting on Bitcoin, you know, in 2013. Like, this is something that will grow legs, which is ironic because there's no legs involved in Organiary, but it will grow. And I think it's just up to some slightly braver individuals, I think, to sort of put their necks on the line and be involved. And we are incredibly passionate about this project. We can't wait for, you know, the future of this, because we understand and empower with knowledge that we know will help people. And I think the reason that both Tracy, Niall, and myself have been involved in this project is because we are heart-led individuals. We want to see people thrive and do well. And when you understand how much this can improve people's health and then their lives, you know, you want to be involved. So it really has to resonate with you. And I challenge anyone that's out there to start now and to optimize later is a mantra that I use in every area of my life. It doesn't have to be a perfect science. Start now, optimize later.
And if you do start, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram, and send us a note that says, I just had my first beef liver. I just had my first chicken heart. I just tried Also, Buko for the first time. I can't believe bone marrow is wonderful. Just send us a note. We will share that on. You know, that's what this is about, because it's opening up people to a whole new food group that is super healthy, and perhaps then will, you know, lead to a domino effect of improving people's health.
And I think the advantage you guys have is that this information has been withheld from us. The information that organ meats are nutrient dense, incredibly good for our health, and are cheap, has been withheld from dietary guidelines, from the people that should be giving us health advice. And when you withhold information from people, it makes them more determined to understand what that message is and then to share it. So good luck with Organiary 2021. I'm very proud to be part of the launch today.
Oh, thank you, Belinda.
Thank you so much, Belinda, for coming on and doing this for us today. And so honoured that you took the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peace and love.